In the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Hope everyone is well, happy, and healthy today. I'm your convener for this session 8 in the Futures Literacy Week with Chulalongkorn and UNESCO. My name is Dicky Sofjan from ICRS, Universitas Gadjah Mada, and based in Yogyakarta. I'm proud to say that ICRS and I have been a long-time partner and collaborator with Chulalongkorn University, along with other friends here. And of course, I feel honored to be here as the convener of this Futures Literacy Conference. We will be discussing a highly delicate topic this afternoon on fostering empathy and compassion for a sustainable society, while also examining what the future holds for religion, faith, and spirituality, essentially to usher in a kinder and gentler society that we all hope and pray for. Of course, I'm mindful that this conference session is currently being overshadowed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as we all can agree, there is very little empathy and compassion in wars and conflicts anywhere. We could only hope and pray for the best for the innocent people of Ukraine who are dearly paying the price for this military aggression. I just learned that there are already over 1 million displaced Ukrainians who are crossing the borders to Poland and other neighboring countries. As they say, we are living in an era of VUCA. Yeah, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So I find that empathy and compassion are hard to come by these days. But as someone who has been teaching and researching about religion and interreligious issues, I've also come to realize that religion, faith, and spirituality too have become somewhat elusive. With the digital age and deep social media engagement, and the ongoing pandemic, we're seeing a transformation at a very fundamental level of the traditional organized religions and faith groups into perhaps something more spiritual. And by that, I mean spiritual awareness and practices that may destabilize the existing and pre-existing forms of religion, faith, and spirituality. I think some of us have observed this throughout the almost more than 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with me today, I have 3 faithful friends of mine who are expert practitioners in their respective faiths and fields. There is Dr. Swati Chakraborty, who is an assistant professor in GLA University in India and founder of Web Platform for Dialogue. She is also active in the Interfaith Circle with Kaichit, the King Abdullah Center. So welcome, Swati. Then we have my longtime buddy, Dr. Nadarajah Manickam, who is a Malaysian, but currently engaged by the Multiversity platform, Loyola Extension Services at the Loyola College of Social Sciences. Hello, Nat, how are you? Good to see and talk to you again. Then last but not least is my dear friend, Theodore, or otherwise known as Ted. We have worked on a number of research and writing projects before. He is the academic director of the Institute for Transformative Learning of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists based in Bangkok. So with the help of these 3 experts, we'll try to respond to the following questions. One is, how can religious and faith communities play a role in fostering empathy, compassion, so as to help build a more sustainable and resilient society? How could religious and faith communities transform and make a kinder and gentler society? In other words, what role would you like to see religion, faith, and spirituality play in the communities as we move into the uncertain future? But what about the non-religious communities? I mean, empathy and compassion are not solely, dominated and owned by the religious people. I mean, some non-religious people also do have empathy and compassion. How do we respond to that? Yeah. What does the future hold for empathy and compassion as far as religion, faith, and spirituality are concerned? So for me, those are some of the questions I would like to pose in this session. And as the order of the day, I'd like to first invite Ted, and then followed by Swati, and then Nad. Yeah, so Ted, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dicky. Thank you. It's actually been very difficult for me to formulate my responses here. I woke up with tremendous fear, actually, about the Ukraine situation. The IPCC just gave a report where the head of the UN made a remarkable comment that the fossil fuel industry is behaving as an arsonist on our only home. I mean, extremely, very unusual times. I have felt that the key issue of our time is that we all live in a highly extractive and exploitative economic system, and it's a fossil fuel system. And that system comes with a set of values, which I think are actually a kind of religion in themselves, a set of values that highly prize prestige, that wealth, the power to control, and these kind of things. One reason that I feel that religious traditions hold out some hope is that they are alternate. They do present an alternative to this sort of what I start to feel is a kind of rote where everybody's living in silos, not only academic departments, but everyone is sort of living out their role while we destroy the earth. So my feeling is that religious traditions can play a role, but only if they have a certain kind of attitude. And I'd like to say a little bit more about, to kind of present that argument. So first of all, oops, let me share the screen here. This is, if nothing else, I can perhaps suggest some really good books. This is a book called A Common Faith by American philosopher John Dewey. And John Dewey took a really unusual perspective towards religious traditions. He thought that they had an actual natural function in human life in that they presented ideals that were so powerful and all-encompassing that they could create a response in people that unified a person's life and brought about a harmonious emotional attitude. And the thing is that he felt that the traditions themselves, the beliefs and so on, were becoming weaker, but that what was the true function could actually do without the tradition. And that is that we have ideals that grow up out of our natural perceptions and enjoyments of life. And that some of those ideals are so powerful as to motivate us to transform our lives to and unify our personalities around those ideals. And let me just, he said the religious attitude is present in every aspect of human experience that is concerned with estimate of possibilities, with emotional stir by possibilities as yet unrealized, and with all action in behalf of their realization. All that is significant in human experience falls within this frame. Now, I think what I'd like to suggest is that this kind of attitude is quite manifest and present for both religious communities and non-religious communities, but that all human beings do find something that they hope will be true. Now, some of those things are going to be less than worthy, but others are going to be truly worthy. How do we find that? So I wanted to share just a very few slides of a group of people that I have learned so much from. And I do believe that this group manifests the kind of attitude that Dewey was talking about. And so let me say here that these are some of the socially engaged Buddhists with the greatest regional or global impact. Thich Nhat Hanh, Dalai Lama, Dr. Ambedkar, and Sulak Sivarak. And from the Buddhist point of view, the logic, let me say this, that what is common to all of them is that they see the sphere of religion as being all of humanity, of being the universe. In other words, it's not a personal sphere where you try to become virtuous or follow some practices, but that here's the key logic in Buddhism, is that suffering comes about not only in a personal context. Suffering comes about in a social context, and it comes about through deeply embedded social structures. And there's so much to learn from how each one of these individuals have encountered social structures, caste, great power conflicts, modern wars. In the case of Sulak, contemporary development, industrialization, consumerism. Let me see, there we go. I've given much of my research and of my academic time to studying socially engaged Buddhism in Thailand. And in fact, I came roughly 20 years ago to do this research. And these are some of the key people who have influenced me, and who also, I think, are some of the most influential engaged Buddhists who have access also to the outside world through the medium of English. And I don't plan to spend a lot of time on each one of them, because I don't have that time. But what I want to say is that each one of them have taken these sources of social sources of suffering, and brought them into a personal context by means of creating institutions, leading temples, creating trainings where the participants can not only look at themselves and their own suffering and work on their own growth, but that they can also not only analyze intellectually, but encounter how those kinds of suffering occur socially. So Pachahutanawat is a very influential alternative educator. And so part of his programs would be taking students to visit a community in Thailand where the villagers have experienced mining, okay? And in the same time, in the same program, that you have an exploration of one's own sources of suffering. Weipon Khön Gao is a really gifted trainer in looking at how gender and other relationships of power, of oppressive relationships, affect individuals and change their thinking and constrain them and create suffering. And she does that by bringing that up as something to be grasped and worked with within a training. I want to focus a little bit here on Sulak Sivarak. I think that his concept in this book from 1992, Seeds of Peace, A Buddhist Vision for Renewing Society, he has a wonderful article that I highly recommend. It's called Buddhism with a small b. And I suggested in my abstract that this is the kind of religion that can create empathy. And what he means by Buddhism with a small b is that practitioners of a religion would focus on the teachings and of cultivating within themselves tolerance and kindness and awareness. That cultivating virtue is also the key to transforming societies towards peace and justice. And that to do that, we cannot do it alone. We need communities for our own rest and retreat. We need communities for exploring what would it mean to follow the Buddhist tradition and its ways of structuring social and artistic life. Now, what's extraordinary about this essay is that Sulak is adamant. He says something to this effect. Buddhism, as it actually is practiced in Southeast Asia, is basically a tool for the legitimization of dictatorships and large corporations. Now, I have tremendous respect for a devout practitioner of Buddhism who can critique his own tradition in that way. The other thing that Sulak and all of the other socially engaged Buddhists I've shown on screen stand for very strongly is that to be virtuous means to be working towards empathy and compassion towards everyone. It's not about aggrandizing one's own tradition. It's not even about proselytizing, but it's about seeking within oneself the way to bring about one's own compassion, one's own ability to be aware and mindful, but at the same time to study and to be fully aware as much as one can of the way the world is working at the most complex structural level. I have tremendous respect for Sulak in that he is a person who's also followed through on his vision. So this is an ashram called Wongsanit Ashram. You can see that it's a very serene and beautiful place, and it's specifically designed as a place for social activists and for Buddhist practitioners to retreat from society and to study and to practice. He also helped to create, he was a co-founder in all these areas, a remarkable network that I now work for. I'm an anthropologist. I came to Thailand as a researcher. From 7 years ago, I've been working for the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. And what I find remarkable about this network is that it's grassroots oriented. It's oriented towards alleviating suffering. But especially the suffering of the common people. It's oriented towards this kind of analysis. But what is amazing is how open it is ideologically and how open it is in terms of practices. So you can find, INEB has welcomed virtually any person, not only Buddhist, but any person, Catholics and Christians and Hindus and Muslims, who agree with the goals of cultivating kindness in oneself and of developing an analysis that is sharp enough to see what institutions are continuing to create suffering. So I want to appreciate Sulak for his leadership in keeping this kind of openness so that INEB has continued for these many years to have this welcoming attitude. I think that I happen to have been, I was born in South India of Christian parents. And so for me, this is quite possible, and I've seen it among Muslim friends, some of whom are here, but I really believe that this is, that Islam with a small I, Christian with a small C, Hinduism with a small h, are all extremely important in that they make possible the practice and the devotion to practices and teachings and study of one's own tradition, while also committing oneself to a much more universalistic view. I think I better stop there. That's been roughly 10 minutes. I have some more slides, but maybe I can bring them up later. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Ted, for your inspiring presentation. And it's really enthralling to listen to you and to learn about this sort of movement for Buddhism with a small p, with a small b. Of course, we in Islam have also had the experience of having that Islamic movement toward bringing down the idea of Islam with a small I as well. And usually the short form for that is progressive Islam. Now, perhaps later on we could talk more about how the socially progressive agenda of the religious communities could play out in trying to foster this empathy and compassion in society. Thank you very much, Ted. Yeah. So the next presenter is Dr. Swati Chakraborty. By all means, please start your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, first of all, Dr. Dicky. Myself, Dr. Swati, I would prefer to have here with all the presenters. Particularly, India is always believing in the spirituality as a part of their culture. So culture and religion is playing a vital role in terms of fostering compassion, love, affection towards their family, towards their society. Starting with the nature, because nature is the one which is very close to everyone. And I think from the nature, we are accepting the sustainable developmental goals as well. So religious background is starting with the natural evaluation, and nature is inspiring us much more than anything. So if we are talking about the new generation, they are very much into the digital affection. Again, the compassion and love of their digital affection is also playing a vital role. And in terms of in a negativity, it's been starting a lot. Digital era, we can't able to ignore them, because nowadays everyone is being addicted with this digital devices. But what we can do, we can create a bridge between this metaverse and into the spirituality as well as religious connections. For me, compassion is a basis of ahimsa, a core virtue of Hindu philosophy, and everybody with their practice towards their faith, towards their spiritual complications that we are facing nowadays into this current generation. Ahimsa or non-injury is compassion in action that helps actively prevent suffering in all living things, as well as helping beings overcome suffering and move closer to liberation. We pray to nature, to animals, to every living being in Hinduism. We pray to image that replicate holy deities in the form of Shivalinga. Just before 2 days, we had Shivaratri. And on that very day, I was in the beach of Goa in a vacation with my 3-year-old boy. So I'm sharing a wonderful themes to you. And he was actually making with the sands of a Shivalinga. He doesn't have anything to offer, but what he had that time, only water. So what I was trying to do, I was trying to build a Shivalinga with the helping of 3 years of old son. And he was very happy with making that. Not as a religious or spiritual believer, but as to create something concrete. And that creativity is actually meaning a lot to this particular young boy. So with this, we can have a footprint towards the level of spirituality in a very small baby steps. In Hinduism, spiritual aspirants are advised to overcome their selfish desires, cultivate, nurture their detachment, renounce worldly pleasures, absorb their minds in the contemplations of God or self, and cultivate oneness as a part of their self-purification and self-realization. That is very important. As Dicky rightly pointed out, and also Ted, that world is suffering a lot due to the greediness, due to their desires of having everything. And world, not only the world, each and every creature is now suffering a lot due to this. And with the presence of compassion is indicated of the person's spiritual growth, inner awakening, and discriminating intelligence. Hinduism always advocates compassion for all as a part of the universal message that all life forms as a part of one large universal family, that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Since everyone and everything in the universe is a manifestation of God, who is also present in us and every self, it becomes necessary that we see this universal presence and extend the same feelings of love, devotion, which we feel for him to all. So what we can able to see, that is the self-reflection to others, the feeling of soulness, This feeling of soulness, that is Atman, is one of the biggest realization of devotions. The virtue of compassion can be divided into three types: the pure, the impure, and the dark, according to the predominance of the gunas, namely sattva, tama, rajas. Only those whom have mode of sattva, that is a purity, is predominantly present, can show selfless, unhindered, sattvic compassion to all, and they help those in suffering as part of their service and devotion to God. Others may have compassion, but it will be trained by the rajas or tamas or both. In them, compassion will be conditional and subject to desires, attachments, delusion, and personal agendas. Rajasic people may help others and show compassion out of pride, egoism, vanity, or selfish motivations. To show off their wealth to others, they are showing the compassion out of their egocentric mentality. They are the rajas. Their compassion is usually conditional. Tamasic people, they always trying to show extreme compassion and extreme anger and cruelty according to the situation. When they show compassion, it is usually meant to deceive others and cause them harm in the end, or to achieve some destructive end. So love, kindness, and the sameness, that is non-violence, non-stealing, charity, selfless services, all these things without any discrimination, harming others with intelligence, devotions, and virtues are the outpourings only. Showing the mercy, that is the daya, to others is an important virtue and part of any household obligatory duty. Nowadays, we are into the era of digital affection. So at least what we can do, we can have at least some time for our digital detoxification. And that is the starting point of compassion, love, and purity of our own self. So starting the day with the digital detoxification, and that is very essential practice towards a compassion, love, and affair to everyone. And God is within ourselves. That belief, that soulness will definitely make ourselves positive and energetic for the entire day. So starting a baby steps, we can't able to stop the war. What we can do, we can take a baby step for the compassion and fostering equality, fostering love and equal rights for everybody in this world. Take a baby step, starting your day from your family towards the society, then for your own nation, then think for your entire world. That is starting the local to global. Here I would like to stop myself. Thank you so much, Dicky, for giving me the opportunity. And maybe with your questions, we can have more discussion into this.
Great. Thank you very much, Swati, for your enlightening talk. And I like the idea of digital affection and how we could liberate ourselves from it and how to detoxify ourselves and our society from it, and hopefully be more kinder and be more compassionate to others and be able to see the kinds of suffering that others are experiencing before us. Thank you very much, Dr. Chakraborty. Now I'd like to invite Nad to give us your thoughts on how we should foster empathy and compassion in our society. Go ahead, Nad.
Okay. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm working with a difficult system. Okay. Thank you so much, Dicky, and thank you, Ted and Swati, for this wonderful sharing. and starting the conversation. So let me share some thoughts, which I'm going to base slightly on my on my synopsis, which I sent. There were 3 or 4 areas. I hope I can finish it within 10 minutes. My first submission is that we are living in a broken, cruel world. I think this has been reflected in both the speakers. And when I say we are living in a broken, cruel world, and there are a lot of statistics on the global footprint, the planetary boundaries, slavery index, terrorism index. There are many facts and figures, but I just want to reflect on one figure and start this little sharing. Children below the age of 15 will die in this 1 hour that we are having a session. About 500 plus or 600 young people below 15 will die before the end of this session. The whole program. So, and like that, if you go, you can look at how the extinction rate, that before the end of this session, there will be so many species. It's about three species or 6 species, 3 to 6 species every hour disappearing. So by the end of this session, you have a huge number of people going through pain, through disaster, through death. So that is the state of the world. This is globally, this global statistics available. You can check in anywhere. So we are in a sense of a state of major difficulty, globally speaking, and it is translated, of course, at our local levels. So we are, in a sense, when we can sit down here and be responsible or be conscious of the fact that as we talk, young people are suffering, dying, or dead. We are certainly in a broken world. You know, it's a very sad state of affairs. Okay, that is the first submission. I want to say that we are living in such a world. The second thing I want to say, how did we come here? There are 2 things I want to share. One is, there is this university, mainstream university industry nexus, which is tied to creating a kind of global occupational infrastructure or edifice which serves the economy. So this nexus, you see, we are not, I don't want to go into a major discussion there right now, but this nexus has created a lot of unsustainable trends and sustains those unsustainable trends. If you look at, for instance, the amount of toxic chemicals that are pumped into the environment, it's about 10 million pounds of toxic chemicals pumped into our air, water, and land. It is pumped by the industries. And who are in these industries? The young people we train in the universities and who go and look for this job in the industries. So what we are creating is, through our industry, in university nexus, we are actually supplying people to the whole global occupational structure who are going and doing work, not necessarily consciously, not necessarily aiming to do this, but they are supporting and sustaining a system that is actually the thing that we are talking about. You know, it is an unsustainable activity that's going on through this university industry nexus. So I'm talking about this. So this nexus is creating a major problem, and we need to look at this carefully. I'll come to that in a while. Now that is one problem, this nexus, which we need to look at. The second one is our problems, which we are facing, this cruelty, we are facing this pain of people and other living forms that are going through such difficulty and destruction of the habitat. Many of those things, this cannot be resolved by technology means, by material improvements. This is a reflection of a deep moral and spiritual crisis. And we need to recognize the fact that these two things, this nexus, this on a materiality level, the nexus between the university and the industry, and on a more invisible level, this whole moral and spiritual crisis is the basis of why we are living in a broken and cruel world. Okay, so I think these submissions are basically for a deeper investigation, exploration, research into how do we do this, how do we disrupt this university industry nexus, how do we disrupt it? Because that's one of the biggest contributor to unsustainability. Our universities have always been not critically examined what they are doing. They're creating generations of people, young people, and putting them into an economy that is destroying us. So who is responsible? We are not looking at the people, we are looking at the industries, we are looking at some individuals, looking at some organizations, but we are not looking at the universities that are working closely with industry, creating these generations of young people, putting them into an occupational structure which is globally accepted, available, and that is creating a major complications in terms of the issue of sustainability. So that is going on one side. So we need to, in terms of wanting more compassion in the world, we need to re-examine this role that the universities are playing. Are they playing? And look at, sorry for this small reference. I was looking at the materials of this conference. The first thing you will see is the quote from World Economic Forum, not from the 60, 70 years old futurist studies movement. We are talking about Chula Literacy Week, but futures have been studied by a group of people from the 60s. So we have about 60, 70 years of people who have been looking at future and studying it and creating methodologies. But instead of reflecting them or reflecting religion, reflecting Buddhism, they have put World Economic Forum's quote in the first page. What does that tell us about our future? Is that the future that we are talking about? The future that the World Economic Forum is suggesting to us, run by the world biggest capitalists? Imagine you need to have 52 over 1,000 rupees to be a member, and you need to have 500,000 over dollars to be a strategic member. And who can be a strategic member? All the big corporation people. So who are we now talking about who's going to govern our future? The religious people, the United Religious Conference, URI initiative that has got a lot of things to offer. The World Parliament, Religious Parliament, that has a lot of things to give. The indigenous people have a lot of things to offer, but we put world. So if we continue to keep this relationship of the university and industry in this way, we are not going to do any disruption. If you are talking about disruption, this is a disruption. And if you are talking about the Great Reset, we need to talk about the Great Reset by unfolding, dismantling this relationship and creating new ways of being, which Ted and the others were, and Swati was talking. If you want to introduce that into the way in which we create livelihood for people, we need to disrupt this. That is a Great Reset. The Great Reset is not what is the mainstream talk about. So we need to first do this disruption, university industry disruption, and we need to work that systematically, and there are a lot of organizations to do that. The second thing is that we need to relook at how do you address the moral and spiritual crisis. And that you can only, I have a few minutes, I will just wind up. You can only look at that in relation to how we rethink the economy, how do we rethink our relationship, how do we rethink our education. So we have to do a number of things of that kind in order to open up the world for more compassion to be available to people. You know, we can't have a situation where people kept talking about peace, making a lot of noise of peace, and be the major seller of weapons. That is a moral crisis. How do you actually talk about that? When we have people making so much of money during pandemic, they have even an article called Pandemic Predators. We have so many people making so much of money. You just have to read the Oxfam report. It is crazy. And if you have this kind of people, can we have the billionaires to change their moral stance and share the wealth? You know, they say tax the billionaires. Just do a compassion tax of the billionaires. Can we rethink the way in which we address this moral and spiritual crisis by addressing all these kind of things that are going in the world, so that, you know, you can actually open up more spaces for compassion to be available, to be able to be grown, to serve what we can do. And one last thing, if IPCC report today, if we cross 1.5 and if we move towards 2, we are going to be in serious trouble. We need to reverse. This reverse of this temperature, global temperature rising, cannot be done by technology. It has to be resolved at a spiritual level. People have to let go a lot of things. They have to change. They have to give up. They have to share. That is the only way we can reverse. Otherwise, if you're going to think the university and the industry going to reverse this, it's not going to happen. It's going to be going to be worse and worse. The only way we can reverse that is to address the spiritual crisis we are in, and universities have to pay attention, great attention, to how to deal with this spiritual crisis. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nad. That was really inspiring to listen to you. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that the ecological crisis has been, founded based on the moral and religious and spiritual crisis. And I think people like Mary Evelyn Tucker has made this argument, in the 60s and 70s. But again, we have very short memory spans. People forget. And we tend to be, driven and being inundated by all kinds of, things to do, and the technologies, the new up and coming technologies that are in the market, and people competing for all sorts of stuff. And we do get lost in our sort of moral vision of society. What I like about all three presenters is that, we are really, in essence, developing the so-called sort of dialogic transcendence, as Prasenjit Johara would say. So there is this sort of need for us to come together in terms of our various religious traditions and spiritual practices, to come together and to realize that we are indeed facing a crisis. And I think even that realization is hard to come by, even as we have seen, many wars, many decades of wars and conflicts and various crises happening, including the ecological crisis, obviously. But yet, people are still not awakened. Now, I guess the question, goes back to the idea of, why is it so difficult for people to understand and realize that empathy and compassion are necessary building blocks, to build a kinder and gentler society, so that we can have a much more resilient and sustainable society? I mean, are empathy and compassion really diametrically opposed to global capitalism, or the practices that we see as business as usual? And I think, Nad, you brought up this idea about the university industry nexus. I think we are seeing this everywhere around the world. And, you know, some people see this as business as usual. I mean, that's how university is supposed to operate. At least that's how some people, you know, assume. But we know that that's not providing the kind of help to society that we need from among the intellectuals and scholars. Yeah. And so the question, I guess, that we need to ask ourselves is, you know, so how do we bring out this empathy and compassion from our educational system, from our, you know, moral, religious institutions and spiritual, you know, groups, associations and practices? You know, how do we tell the world about this? You know, it seems that, you know, nobody talks about empathy and compassion anymore. Except, you know, for some very sort of artificial or superficial, you know, disclaimers on things. Yeah. So I'd like to perhaps invite Swati first to give your response to that, and you could also respond to any of the other presenters' thoughts. Yeah, Swati.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think the process, what we can follow, I think Dr. Nat rightly pointed out that the student, we can start with the student because in the young age, when the mind is fresh, we can create more compassion, more trust about others, because the concept of others is the root cause of any pain, any mistrust. So if in the very early age, if we can have some kind of extracurricular activity, rather than to do some playing or, you know, investing time into the indoor games, I think number one is outdoor game is one of the major point where student can bring together, apart from the religious beliefs or their spiritual beliefs, they will be together as a friend first. So this concept and this identity as an individual is very important and nurtured in a very early age. So we can create the space equally for all the student, all the child together. I think that's a very important point to address.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Swati. Ted, I remember when we had Bhikkhuni Dhammananda speaking in one of our conferences in Chula, she was saying that, you know, social transformation begins with the self, you know, self-transformation and social transformation. So how do we get out of this, you know, web of you know, consumerism and technologization of society, and try to bring in these more sort of inner moral, spiritual strength and resources that we have to bring about more empathy and compassion?
Yeah, I think it's not easy to answer that. Can I show just a slide or two in my response? Is that okay? Yeah. Let me hear. And sorry, here. There we go. I was asked within INEB to create what we call School of English for Engaged Social Service, and my answer actually really begins with myself, because I have my limits, you know, and I think I'm not alone. In other words, I think that each of us needs to find a practice. I'm someone who is convinced that each of us has intelligence far beyond what we've been able to show. Each of us is a huge reservoir of love and compassion already. But we have to, somehow we've been hurt and we've been constrained. And so we need to engage in practices that will remove the obstacles to us being ourselves, to us being freely who we would like to be, for us even saying what we want. So I want to say just really briefly that it's been a wonderful experience to teach students from all over the world. And one of these are three things that we do that I think are really key. So number one, we bring them together from many different places. And you see in the bottom left, there's a Muslim woman from Indonesia and a Tamil Hindu woman here who's also exploring Buddhism. And they're in a place where they're working on English and leadership and many challenging things together. And this is a trust activity. And, you know, beautiful things happen when we teach about ethnic prejudice and racism and classism, but then they also are in a place where they're in close contact with others. A second thing we do is that I think that contemplative practice is really important, and not only Buddhist contemplative practice, but silence from whatever tradition, or pure silence, or silence in nature. And many people have talked about the meditative qualities, the contemplative qualities of nature. We incorporate this in our class, but probably core for me is up here, where we teach a listening practice where not only are you free to tell your story and the listener is trained to listen with respect, but we also allow space for the emotions that come along with those stories, whether they be laughter or crying or yawning or embarrassment, or so. And let me just stop the share here. I was struck this morning because in a very excellent panel, the students were invited to speak and nobody really spoke, and it didn't surprise me, so we work for weeks and weeks and weeks by offering these moments for the students to actually share who they are. And it takes some doing for students who have been in the passive role, in the rote learning role, and in Thailand even have been hit or humiliated for not knowing answers. It takes some work for them to feel like, oh, maybe my thoughts really have value. Maybe what I want is really important. So I feel like there's a big task there to move students from performing a role to actually being who they are and thinking the thoughts that they're really thinking and saying what it is they want. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ted. I think that's helpful. Nad, how do you cultivate the mind and heart so that we can truly understand reality as they are, and not be fazed by the sort of going on, with global capitalism and all the consumerist culture and hedonist, lifestyles and so on? How do you cultivate the heart and mind to get?
First of all, let me tell you that it's not really easy in the context of, the mainstream and the power of this. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you get your mic closer to you, please?
So, in the sense that, the mainstream is very powerful. The attraction, seduction is very powerful. So it is difficult. But what I have done in the last 2-3 years is develop an understanding and then implementing that understanding in terms of programs. We call it learning journeys. We don't call it programs. So one of the things that I have done out of an experience from my university where I couldn't continue my work is starting this Gandhi Mandela Freire Fellowship, which is based on a lot of things on deschooling, decolonization, conscientization, a number of other kinds of concerns, because that is required if you want to really reach out to. So with that, it's my understanding, which I've shared with this college and we are working on it, is that university education has become very functionalized, very connected with economy. So it's so functional that they have no time for the development of the inner life of the students. And we cannot have inner life of students as a co-curricular activity, extracurricular activity. It must be central to their studies. It must be central to their formation. So university education has to undergo some change. Unfortunately, I am in a social lab of a college where I can explore these ideas, where we have separated a functional education and roots education, the basic foundational education, which some people call core curriculum and things like that. So the roots education, it go much more into exploring the inner life of young people. So without going too much, it's too big to share in this, but this Gandhi Mandela Friday Fellowship on Conscience and Compassion, we are focused on 3 months of, it's basically self and social, initiating self and social transformations. For the first 3 months, the fellows, they have to go through a process of exploring self, answering the question, who am I? Why am I doing this course? What am I doing in this place? You know, so the 3 months they have to go through that process, which involves a number of a very difficult process for young people who have gone through the mainstream educational courses. We are talking about learning encounters, learning journeys, and teachers don't come there and teach. They come there and share. They come there and engage. These encounters are engagement between the teacher and the fellows. So we're changing the pedagogy a bit. We are looking at how to generate the inner life to explore this inner life and regenerate it, asking them to rethink everything that they have known. So this is a 3 months they're going through. Now they're going through the second month. So the logic behind it, the theory behind that, the foundation behind that is that once they explore and they engage with themselves, with others, and with nature, the foundation for both conscience development and compassion would set in. You know, this first 3 months of all these kind of questions, this whole addressing of this embodied self interacting with the other embodied self, this own inner experience, the silence, the emptiness that the vibrant emptiness that they should to capture, to empty their mind, get out of their mind, dump. You know, you have the story of a Zen teacher, you know, where somebody goes there with want to learn how to do Zen, and the Zen master said, and I asked him what do you do? He say, I do this, I do this, I do this. And so the Zen master tells him, you have too many things in your head, and I cannot teach you unless you clear it. That's the process we are doing here. We are trying to clear all their earlier thoughts, opinions about the same, opinion other people, opinions about the world, and create enough space to build this and regenerate the inner life before we get into the hard area of compassion, discussion on compassion. We are not talking so much about empathy because there is some difficulty between empathy and compassion. Though it does not clash, there are some challenges. So the foundational emotion is compassion. This embodied self in relation to another embodied self, which is the other. So that will go into a theory. So the whole idea is 3 months they have to build their inner life, regenerate their inner life as much as they can before we get into the question of how they can act in a compassionate fashion in the areas that they are working on. They are working on human rights, they are working on migrants, they are working on feminist theology, they are working, there's a Buddhist who's working with a 4-piece. So we have about 7 students doing many, they are not students, they are fellows who are actually working. And they are now beginning to understand that, you know, for instance, a person on migrant, now is beginning to understand that there's no migrant in the world. Migrant is a term we have given because of political context in which we are put. How can a human being be called a migrant in the first place? That is a philosophy of it. Now, we are born on this earth, we cannot be a migrant. So now the understanding starts changing a bit. Of course, in a practical context, in the context, they may look at it differently, but to begin with the fact that we are not migrants, we are here and we share this earth. So these little changes are taking place because you are exploring the inner life. So that is how I am, I mean, in short, I'm trying to build in by changing the type of education to roots education, not functional education, and going into self first before you get into the social transformation business. You know, you get into understanding yourself and ask the question, who am I and what am I doing and be clear about that before you do anything else.
Wow, thank you very much, Nad. Yeah, I remember in some country I used to live in, you know, they actually distinguish between immigrants and expats. And usually the black and brown people are the immigrants and the white people are usually called the expats, you know, in some contexts. And so again, I take your cue on that, that we are all migrants, that we are all in some form or the other on a journey of life. And I think what you're offering, Nad, is something very luxurious, you know, for many of us, you know, and not many people realize that this life is really a journey, you know. I'd like to invite the participants to pose any remarks, questions, or anything to the presenters. I know we have one question from perhaps one of the students or staff from INEB, and it's a question posed to Dr. Swati Chakraborty. And the question relates to your conception of digital affection. And if you intended this term in the sense of negative digital affect or actual affection as a mode of expressing appreciation and love of others. Swati?
Thank you so much. It's a very, very important question. And we can use actually in a both way. First, digital detoxification, if we are being into the negative things for others, because while using the smartphone to create hate speech, incitement that is injurious to the humanity, that is not accepted. But while using the positive sharing good news to others, that is the affection to others, sharing the news of the Ukrainian people and being together with the Ukrainian people with the hashtag, that is the positive things to show the compassion. As Dr. Nad rightly pointed out, that compassion and empathy is not the same thing, but with the compassion, at least we try to show them the sympathy, not the empathy, because empathy is a very harder things to think about the student, but at least to show some sympathy, that is a positive thing. So that is the affection to the other worlds, if we consider them others. Otherwise, we all are equal and we all are actually soul. That's what I believe. So I pointed out in a two-way, that is the two meaning, that one is digital detoxification, if we are creating negative energy to the world, and digital affection, if we can able to create a positivity to the world. Thank you.
Would you like to add anything, Ted or Nad? Or are there any other questions from the participants or comments? Please raise your hand, or you could also type in your question or comments in the chat box. Ted, would you like to add? Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I don't think I have something to add to that question. Yeah.
Nad, I know you've been engaging in a lot of work in the virtual world as well. I mean, you're engaged in a number of sort of spiritual movements virtually. I mean, how do you see this digital ill, so to speak? We know that you know, it has caused a lot of problem in society, most notably the polarization of you know, political opinions and ideological battles, you know, that take place in social media and whatnot, which has indeed caused real problems in society. Yeah. Do you have any comments on that?
I mean, it's a you know, the Swati's discussion on digital toxification and affection and things like that. You know, we need a additional 1 hour to discuss about it. But the only thing I want to add here is, in addition to what you said, that this digital world is now used for this whole area of creating so much of fake news and this post-truth world, that, you know, when you say detoxification, how I think before you need to detoxify, you need to address this fake world they are creating and the kind of information that the post-truth realities that we are faced with. You know, I think that creates such a massive problem in terms of engaging with the world, this mediated world, that experiencing the world has become almost difficult. So even if you detoxify, how do you experience the world through a mediated reality, which is already either fake or it is, or you call it post-truth or things like that? No, how do you engage with it? How do you know what is the truth? How do you know what is real when you have this kind of heavy input? That would be my challenge in terms of engaging with the internet and many of the learning processes. I think has to be still face to face. We benefit a lot from the online thing and all this, but still the face to face thing would be very much more needed. But you know, I may be digressing.
Could I say something after all, Dicky?
Sure, please.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short, but I just listened to the entire book of Ian McGilchrist's The Master and His Emissary, which is about the right brain and the left brain. And he argues that the right brain is actually the one that's open, and where you would talk about emotion and compassion and so on. The left brain more or less receives instructions and is very good at taking things apart, is analytical, and the only thing is the left brain operates kind of in a vacuum. It doesn't have a good sense of reality. And so I feel quite, I love the digital world. I watch movies, I contact people, here we are talking to each other. But on the other hand, I feel more and more strongly that we are in quite a lot of danger when we live in a completely humanly created artificial environment. You know, so I resonate with what you said, Dr. Swati, about nature, and I really think that and also about digital detoxification. But like in my case personally, I'm going to be moving out of Bangkok because I feel it's for my mental health, you know, and I think we actually have to strengthen analog, if I can put it that way, natural communities of real persons we care about and who we're committed to, and keep those really strong so that we can enter with affection into the digital world. You know, I worry quite a lot that if we don't have that balance, that it's, and someone this morning mentioned too, that there's this generational gap in the digital world too, that you know, for a lot of young adults, it's sort of the world, you know, it's become a kind of reality. So those are some thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you, Ted. There is a raised hand here from Aura, who is from the School of Public Policy in Chiang Mai. Go ahead, Aura.
Yes, thank you very much. I've truly enjoyed this panel. I wanted to pick up and ask further about the inner lives, you know, of students that was mentioned by Dr. Nadarajah. I cannot agree more of, you know, the role of universities or education in general that needs to foster the skill sets of, you know, having consciousness, having compassion, starting from oneself before looking at societal level transformations. I'm working in the field of public policy. So I think public policy is the problem and also the solution. I mean, everything that's gone wrong on this planet has to do with wrong policies, basically. Yesterday, I was moderating the panel on University 4.0. One of the panelists also said, everything has gone wrong in the world has come out of scholars from universities. So universities are the sources of problems, and can university be the also source of solutions? I guess my question is, how can we scale up these ideas? I mean, they don't seem so, you know, far-fetched, right? They seem so logical that we need to have consciousness. We need to be aware of ourselves. We need to know our drives, our motivation, our emotion. We need to know the sources of our biases. We need to make decisions based on compassion, seeing others as ourselves. We're all one. I mean, it's just so logical. Even if you take the logical, the right, which side of the brain, the right side of the, no, the left side of the brain, that is, you know, the logical one. It's so logical to me. But so my problem that I'm struggling with, how can we put that into public policy analysis, public policy design, into the minds of politicians or parliamentarians who are making decisions? Any thoughts on that? And if you could share any projects that you've seen that have scaled up beyond, you know, really targeted small group projects of workshops here and there, any large scale governmental projects, please direct me into those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very fine question. Nad, would you like to start and try to respond?
That's difficult because of the simple reason that the government don't support these efforts. You know, the government has certain education policy which goes on in one direction. And I think that this is not a stage to scale up this kind of activities. This is a small group community building effort. For instance, a Gandhi Mandela Friday is a community building effort. We want to build a community over the next 5 years of people who have gone through this process. So it is not meant to, it cannot be given for instance, I have seven fellows. I had 9 fellows. Two couldn't, you know, go through the process. So I have 7 now. I'm only expecting that within the next 3 years, I'll have 21, or I'll have, by next 5 years, I could have about 50 students, 50 fellows who will build a community. This is an alternative community building effort. So if you are thinking about a policy of massifying this, it's very difficult. Certain things cannot be massified and should not be massified because it loses the intensity of what you're doing. You cannot intensify, you cannot massify an intensity of finding yourself. You know, that is why you have only some, you know, the global teachers, whether it's Christ or whether Buddha or whether anybody, there's only 1 or 2 coming up here and there because they go through a really very tough process. And it's a very thing, we can't massify Christ, we can't massify Buddha. It will not work that way. So we need to have, so I'm thinking that the question is wrong. How do we, it's a public policy question, I can understand that, but the question is wrong if you're looking at beyond the university. Because now the university is also a historical fact. It is not a God-given reality that we must stick to history, to university. People are talking about multiversity, people are talking about transversity. They are changing the whole idea of what a university should be referred to as and what it should be actually doing. So in the same way, we need to look at courses and see what these courses should be doing. And can we have a course for 20 people? Certain things you can, but certain things you cannot. So I think this is the only way I can answer now, because only after 3 years I can show you that there's a community now. So this is an alternative community building effort. Thank you.
There is a comment and question from Dexter. Bon, would you like to verbalize your question or would you like me to read it? Dexter? Anyways, all of you can, yeah, go ahead, please, Dexter.
I can verbalize it, yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone, hi, Ted. Yeah, my question is based on this previous, you know, what you just touched on, Dr. Nad, about the post-truth era and what that means for our own, like, sense-making, really. So my question was, many spiritual traditions actually take the illusory nature of reality as a starting point. And it seems to me that the digital manifestation of this is post-truth and the way that these technologies are used to confuse and basically, yeah, produce illusions on a new scale in a new form. So I'm wondering to what degree you see that as actually an important opportunity for directly engaging with the process of self-discovery and self-inquiry in the modern world. If that's our modern means, if that's our modern illusion, how can we work with that illusion in the same way that spiritual traditions have guided us to for millennia now?
Ted again, perhaps. Oh, sorry, Nad again, perhaps, and then I'll give the.
I think Ted, can you help me, Ted?
To me?
That's a tough question.
Okay, go ahead, Ted. You can start, and then the rest can help.
Yeah, no, this is the nature of mind. I'm still thinking about the question on public policy. So Dexter, I really apologize, but your question is complex, and I don't know how to answer your question. I'd like to know your response, but I'd actually, in a minute, if we have time, I'd like to say a little something about the public policy question, but I have to apologize because I don't, it's a good question, Dexter, and I don't know how to answer.
Yeah, I think I need time to address the question you have asked, Dexter. It's a very important question. It's a very, very critical question also for the work that I'm doing. But it will take me a bit of time to answer. Maybe we can engage later. Let me think through this.
Yeah, we have another 10 minutes to reflect on some of these issues. And I'd like all of the presenters to sort of try to think through all of these issues and try to sort of tie it in with how our religious traditions or spiritual practices can help guide us, as Dexter was saying, in trying to navigate through this very confusing digital world. And, with all of the alternate realities and augmented realities, the artificial intelligence, the big data analytics, and so on and so forth. Yeah. I mean, how could our own traditions and spiritual practices help us? I mean, is there a future for religion and our traditional faiths and spiritual practices, or should we just, take them out and find other forms of spiritual practices and religious traditions? Swati, would you like to make your last statements?
What I believe, that everything within ourselves. So that's what I do every day, that at least 5 minutes, not more than that, it's not possible because we all are busy into our daily life. So just try to ask yourself that what would be your goal for today, at least. And starting the day with a belief that not to harm anyone with your words, with your hands. Though as a mother, it's not easy to resist yourself with a 3.5 years old boy and running behind him, not easy to cope up with each and every situation in a very cool, or being a very cool mom, or in a very cool due to this very warm situation worldwide. But what I believe, that starting a day with a positivity is giving you a chance to reflect your own self and what you had in a past. That reflection is very important to see what future you are expecting, because we always believe that future we can't able to see. What we can able to see, that is our present. So starting a day, being your present good, to motivate yourself that you will have a good future, bright future. So that's what I'm doing myself. So that's a very personal reflection and personal sharing to you.
But do you feel that your Hindu tradition and your spiritual practices are sufficient in helping you, guide you? And
yes, absolutely, it's sufficient. Each and every tradition is sufficient. What we are currently doing, we are not following our forefathers. We are not following our parents' guidance. That is a missing part. Even right now also, always trying to connect with your root. I think that root will give you the energy, the root will give you the right path. So each and every tradition, starting with the Catholics, starting with the Judaism. Every tradition have their own beliefs, and each and every tradition have enough good positive things and positive route to give you appropriate path in your future.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Swati. Ted?
Yes, I'd like to use my last couple minutes in responding to, I'm sorry, is your name Ora in public policy? So the situation is so difficult. In terms of upscaling, what I want to start by saying is that in 6 years of doing a 3-month program, we've been able to help a large number of around 80 young adults to not only learn English much better, but to really care about each other from across many, many different indigenous groups and national groups and ethnicities and religions. And so we achieve this English, we achieve a connection, and to be really concerned about things like the climate crisis. But I've seen that it takes a couple years to even train someone to do that. Okay, it's hard enough. I've made plenty of mistakes. But when we do it, there's this huge outpouring of young energy. It's amazing to me. So I feel quite confident that given the right circumstances, you could be creating programs like that across Southeast Asia. It would take 15, 20 years. So it's not really, it's not upscaling in a mass sense. But here's the other thing. I think the situation is much, much more critical than that. I literally have Burmese or ethnic Myanmar students who are currently in the jungle hiding from the military because they advocate for local people. So, and the Thai government is doing nothing to stop that. So here's this, how do you work public policy when the fundaments, the structures are so violent and so destructive, so, and that's, and it's a genuine question. And so I asked to end on that sort of passionate note.
Thank you, Ted. Nad?
Yeah, I've said whatever I need to say. That I think I can only say this, that that we are in a deep moral and spiritual crisis, and as educators we need to pay attention to that in terms of our institution and what it's doing to our young people. What is the address, how we need to address that. And certainly in that context, religious traditions play a role. We need, I like to separate the spiritual experience from religion, the institutionalized religion to an extent, and to introduce a spiritual experience of young people, we need to, one of the major institutions we have is religion. But we need to be careful how we introduce this religious orientation in a setup that's supposed to be circular and things like that. So, addressing the moral and spiritual crisis, we need, and therefore to build a compassionate orientation to address the local and global issues, we need to. We need certainly at least the support of religious tradition, but there are many religious initiatives across the world into which we can actually, with which we can work with. Chulalongkorn University included can work with, in order to build programs. And when you say building programs, you're doing that. You have to stop thinking like a university. University 3 months, 3 years degree. You cannot have a BSc level compassion and MSc level compassion. It makes no sense at all. So if you're introducing a compassion program into your thing, you have to think, how do you going to introduce compassion into a course, or how do you going to get an compassion orientation among the younger people? So we have to stop thinking like a university and think, thinking education in that very narrow sense, and looking at learning, looking at this learning environment in a much more vibrant, much more much more developed sense. I mean, it should move out of this university framework, and therefore policies which serves the university also must change to other kinds of transformative policies. That would be my. Thank you.
Thank you, Nad. Thank you, Ted and Dr. Swati. one of the things that religion offers, or religious traditions offer, is the sense of permanency. You see, and I think this, to a certain extent, help people who are sort of constantly on the go, because they're losing sight of what is real and what is not real. And I guess with the rise of the digital age, we have come to learn that many people can't really differentiate between what is reality and what is not. And one of the features of our many and diverse religious traditions is rituals. And I guess, coming from the Islamic tradition myself, we have the daily obligatory prayers, we have the supplications, we have the recollections, the zikr, and so on. And to a certain extent, rituals do help, people to sort of escape the excruciating reality that they might be facing at some point in life. Yeah, because it provides them that sort of leeway to enter into a sacred time, sacred space, sacred history, and it releases them from the sort of burdens of contemporary life and living. And so to me, as Dr. Swati was earlier saying, maybe our religious traditions are sufficient, but maybe they're not. I'm not quite sure. But then again, I know that religion, faith, and spirituality will remain to be here. It has been here for thousands of years, and I'm sure that it's not going to stop anytime soon, right? So the sense of permanency that religion and religious traditions and spiritual practices give, provides a longer view of our own sort of reality and human history and civilization. Yeah, and hopefully this session will have already provided you with much more sort of complexity and questions. I'm not quite sure whether we have answered all of the questions, but I'm sure that we have probably more questions to ask ourselves and others about how we could foster empathy and compassion through our religious traditions and faith and spiritual practices. And so with that, I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank all of the presenters. Let's give them all a round of applause. And I'd like to
thank you, Dicky, for leading.
And I'd like to thank all of you who have participated in this session, and hopefully you have learned a thing or two. And inshallah, we'll be able to meet again and hopefully connect through more meaningful channels and means. Yeah. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.